Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Lori Nelson. I'm the Executive Director of SheHeroes, and we are delighted today to be featuring not one SheHero, but two SheHeroes. We are having our very first medical career panel. So today is your opportunity to find out everything you want to know and learn about becoming a doctor. So I am delighted to say that we are joined by Dr. Susan DesJardins, who is a pediatric cardiologist at the Orlando Health Center, and also Dr. Verna Gibbs, who is a surgeon at the San Francisco Veterans Hospital. And then, of course, we are also joined by our very own chairwoman, Dr. Sophia Yen, who is also a pediatrician. So I'm going to turn things over to Sophia, and then we will come back to me and we'll start asking some questions.
So I want to thank everyone for coming out on a Sunday in the middle of your summer, but I love that you're all here to learn about the profession of medicine, how we got into it, why it brings us joy when it brings us joy, and the ups and downs. And this is just a great SheHero panel here today with Dr. Verna Gibbs and Dr. Susan DesJardins. Dr. Verna Gibbs has been a long-time supporter, but also a mentor of mine as I went through UCSF medical school, always a light in the room and somebody to follow footsteps in. So the purpose of SheHeroes is we provide free online videos highlighting women in areas where we're underrepresented. And definitely we have achieved parity in the medical school, but we're still trying to achieve parity as chair of the division, chair of the department, head of the hospitals, and in power positions. So we definitely want more people with uteri following in our footsteps, and SheHeroes is for everybody, those with and without uteri. We just want to show that those of us with uteri can do everything that those of you without uteri can do. And we should be, in the same places that we're just here to have equality and to educate you on your options for what you want to be when you grow up. So I'll let Lori take it from here.
Now, many of you may have already seen Dr. Verna Gibbs' video on our website. It's one of our classic gems, one of our favorite videos. So I encourage all of you to watch that. So first of all, though, I'm going to start with Dr. Susan, and let's find out more about what your current job is. Can you tell us what you actually do as a doctor?
Sure. So I am a pediatric cardiologist. So I take care of mostly pediatrics, but actually I do take care of people up into their even 30s and 40s and 50s if they were born with a heart condition, because the adult cardiologists don't really know much about things that you were born with. So we take care of mostly what we call congenital heart disease, where you're born with something abnormal in your heart, you're missing a valve, you're missing a whole chamber of your heart, things are hooked up backwards. There's sort of an infinite variety of abnormalities that can occur. So for me, what's really interesting about pediatric cardiology in particular is that it's very logical. You really have to understand the physiology and why things go the way they do in order to understand why the patient is doing what they're doing in front of you. So it's different every day. Every patient is a little different. Even the ones with the same supposed diagnosis end up being a little different, and so that's pretty exciting. So I do that both inpatient and outpatient. I'm pretty much a general cardiologist, so I do a lot of imaging and a lot of patient care, interacting with families. I don't do the highly technical stuff, but that's sort of my career has been general cardiology, and it's been really fabulous.
Wonderful. Okay, and Dr. Verna, would you like to tell us a little bit about what you do over at the VA Center?
Yeah, so I'm old, as Sophia generously commented, that obviously I was at UCSF before she got there, but I knew Sophia when we were both in Cambridge, actually, and she was at MIT and I was at Harvard, and even though we were many years apart, we both ended up in California. So with that, I would say I am thinking about how to end a medical career, a surgical career. I'm a slam dunk, straight up, always have been very surgically oriented, only really ever thought about surgery, always wanted to be a surgeon. So I would love to retire I would like to retire in 5 years. And that's important to get out there, because even though some of you who are listening are thinking about starting in a career in medicine, it's good for you to also, not you at your age, at your young age, but perhaps some of you who may not be there yet, like how do you end a career? And so I am working on working less, which is really hard for doctors to figure out, because the nature of the medical culture, which I hope that you guys might be interested in or think about a lot, especially as uteri holders, are really, really faced with a lot of decisions that are really hard. Like, if you want to have children, when is the best time to have children? I think Susan mentioned she has a daughter, or she has children, I'm not sure. But be that as it may, say
3.
3. See, you need to definitely hear from this woman because these are really big decisions, and the culture of medicine is just so, I want to say aggressive, but it's also very demanding. And so when you're thinking about all the fabulous things about going into medicine or surgery, the science, the blood, the excitement, whatever you've seen on TV, whatever is motivating you, you also have a lifelong career that you've got to figure out. So I'm thinking about how do you work less? Like, how do you get off call? How do you spend less time in the OR? How do you nurture all the other things that you always thought that you would have time to do and you still want to do? So I have really liked my career in surgery. I still to this day really like a lot about it. And I am, thinking about other things around the whole field of surgery that I also care a lot about and want to do.
All right, excellent. Well, and we always like to kind of start at the beginning with these to just learn a little bit more about our SheHeroes. So I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Susan. Can you tell us a little bit about, what you were like when you were growing up, what your interests were, where did you grow up? Do you have a bunch of brothers and sisters, et cetera?
Yeah, so I grew up in Maryland, one of 4. I'm the third of 4, so I'm the forgotten child. I always like to point that out. We have the oldest boy and the oldest girl and the baby, and then there's me. And I was I think I was pretty independent. I was definitely in a family that really valued education. Like, that was like it. Education was everything. And that was clear from when we were very, very little. Every sort of intellectual aspiration we had was very much supported. I was the most athletic of my 4 siblings, and sometimes looking back, I think maybe that wasn't quite as supported as much because my parents didn't really get it. So I swam a lot, but I never really took it to the next level, because I think you have to have that kind of culture of like understanding why you're putting all this in and really having it be supported. So I hope you kids out there, if you're interested in sports, do what you can, because I think it's a really valuable experience that I got a little bit of, and I wish I had a little more. But I grew up in Maryland, and I like to tell this story about when I decided to be a doctor, because I was 3, and my dad asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I said I want to be a nurse. And he said, well, why don't you want to be a doctor? And I said, well, only boys are doctors and girls are nurses, because this is in 1969. And that was the literal truth, or close to it, right? There's a few doctors out there who are women, but I had never met any of them. And, fortunately, I grew up in a family where education was everything. And my dad said, no, you can do, and you can be anything you want to be. You just have to go to school for a long time, and you have to work really hard to be a doctor, but you could do that. And I'm like, oh, okay. I guess I'll do that. And then from then on, that's all that I wanted to be. I never really changed my mind. I never had the ballerina fantasy or anything. I just wanted to be a doctor. And then when I got to be about 10 and I started babysitting at 12, then I wanted to be a pediatrician. And then I got to medical school and I realized I don't really want to be just a pediatrician, not just a pediatrician, but a pediatrician is too hard because you have to know too many things. So I had to like narrow it down so I could know a lot about the thing that I am doing, because I'd like to know everything about it. So then I had to subspecialize. But I think, and my mom would have said the same thing to me had I asked her, but I like that it was my dad that told me that, because back in the day, that wasn't always necessarily the case.
No, that is absolutely thrilling. I grew up in a family of 8 kids, and I had 2 sisters that wanted to be doctors. And my father said, no, get a nursing degree so you have that to fall back on, and then see if you can be a doctor. So I'm very proud of your father for being so supportive, because my sisters spent their entire lives regretting their decisions. And, now their kids are all doctors because of that. They're inspiring of them.
Oh, that's great.
So Dr. Verna, let's talk about, you have a very inspiring background. Let's talk a little bit about your childhood and background.
So it's either Dr. Gibbs or Verna, but Dr. Verna kind of isn't right.
Tell me whatever you want.
I love me to use everybody's titles, so I try to be
there you go. So yeah, like Verna works too.
Okay. All right.
So I forgot the question though.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background, about your childhood, where you grew up?
Right.
You have a pretty inspiring story.
When I first signed on for this, I asked just to look at my video. It's not my video, but the SheHeroes video, because then it explains everything that is kind of introductory about the things that I chose to do, I guess, around medicine, a little bit about my family background, has some very cool pictures. I think the way that the folks who did that particular video, they just did a really good job. The music is absolutely horrible. And I'm really deep into music, but we didn't have any say about that. But the way that they spliced and cut into and moved things along in the very same type of questions. So I'm sure that there's so much more that we could share this morning. So what I would ask everybody who's on this call to do, if you haven't looked at the video number 9, then that's the one that's on me. And just go look at that. And that will tell you everything about some of these things, and we can move ahead to other things that you might ask. I know you're going to hate me for that, Lori, but it's going to make you do some homework after this fabulous Sunday afternoon together.
Well, as a matter of fact, Dr. Gibbs, I just watched your video. So
well, thank you for that.
I think she's giving the homework to the viewers, that this is, we want to train everybody to go to SheHeroes.org website, watch these amazing videos that we've put together. We'll also put together today's will be on there. And I just wanted to chime in that I think all of us had similar stories. If you watch Dr. Gibbs' video, she talks about how her brother got a chemistry set. He didn't want to play with it, and she decided to play with it, and she became the doctor. Mm-hmm. And my story was, being Asian American, your choices are doctor, engineer, and MBA or something. And so I like science and I like people. And I think if you just like science, go get the PhD and go get your Nobel Prize is the straight path there. But I like people. And so medicine, every patient you meet has a unique story, and you can take from that story and help them improve their health. And that's why I chose pediatrics over adult medicine, because adult medicine for me it was always too late. They already had lung cancer. Exactly. They already had liver cancer. I couldn't save them. And, part of medicine is you want to help people. You want to save them. You want to fix them. You want to make them better. And I love adolescent medicine because we could catch them at the beginning of behavior, smoking, sex, drugs, and be like, don't do this one. If you do it this, then make sure you prevent diseases and unplanned pregnancy. And, don't do it unless it's a mutual relationship, loving and understanding, et cetera, but do things in the right way and prevent unplanned pregnancy, prevent HIV, prevent lung cancer, prevent liver cancer. And then the lazy side was, I love pediatrics because usually they only have one problem, whereas adults had like 5 different problems, 5 different drugs, all interacting. And I was like, I don't want to memorize all these interactions. I just want one drug, one problem, no interactions. And so I went into medicine to help people and to use science and to hear, everybody's stories. Though I also didn't go into family medicine because there were generally older people that would go on for 3 hours and I was too nice and I could not cut them off. So every visit with family medicine was 3 hours. And I was like, I cannot do 3 hours. So pediatrics, there was only so much they could say. Whereas family medicine, they had their whole life history. They could go through that. They could go on. And I was just too nice to get them. I'd be like, oh, yes.
Did you know all of that when you were thinking about what you wanted to do? Or did you make that after you had some experience of like in clinics or what family medicine, when did you realize that the difference between those different kinds of choices?
Yeah, no, I think at the, do I want to be a doctor or I want to be something else stage was simply, do I like science? Do I like people? Or do I want to be on a bench dealing with cells or with mice or, that kind of experimentation situation, though as a physician, you can also do that. But I say pick a path because I have friends that are MD, PhDs. And it's like, you can't do both. It's one or the other, like pick a lane and excel at the lane that you're in. And that's exactly as Dr. DesJardins said, specializing so you can know everything there is. And I'm in academia too at Stanford in adolescent medicine. And adolescent medicine, we call sex, drugs, rock and roll, a little acne, some sports medicine. And I pick sex and period and preventing unplanned pregnancy and hashtag periods optional. So anybody with periods that want to talk later, we can talk later, or you just Google Dr. Sophia Yen TEDx talk, hashtag periods optional. But picking the specialty is absolutely, once you get to medical school, then you can tone it down. Do I do adults or do I do pediatrics? And I explained a little of the logic there. Do I do family medicine? Do I do med peds? Because I really like the idea of family medicine. You get to know the whole family, the mom, the dad, the aunt, you deliver the baby, you do the surgery. But I was like, it's a bit much to say you could do all of that in 4 years of training. I always found that a little odd, that OB-GYN is 4 years, that surgery is 7, that pediatrics is 3, and that you're going to learn all that in 4 years. So, I believe in specialists, but the family medicine people are the nicest people out there. And if they know their limits and they know when to refer, then that's perfectly fine. But I as a doctor, like the specialists. And my husband was pre-med, but then dropped out because he didn't like blood. But I think it's all how you look at the blood, like if it's my blood, I'm not happy with that. I had a C-section and there are pictures that my husband took in high res and I'm like, blah, 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 but someone else's blood and you frame it as that's blood cells and it's bringing oxygen and it's fascinating, then it's okay. But there's pee and there's poo. And my daughter's like, I don't want to be a doctor if I have to look at people's butts. And I was like, that's a specialty. You don't have to look at butts. You might, on a complete physical exam, look at it once, but it's not a all the time thing necessarily. It just depends. If you're an eye doctor, you're not going to be seeing any butts.
I can't remember the last time I looked at a butt.
Thank you, because my daughter's on the call. So we need to make sure she knows what she, so medicine is wide. Well, medicine has people that do x-rays. Medicine has people that do lab tests and research. So if you like science and you like people, there's a huge field here for you.
Mm. Well, okay. I'd still like to know from Dr. Gibbs, what did your family support you when you were deciding to become a doctor? How did you fare?
Yeah, so my family, my dad's a doctor, my grandfather was a doctor, and I didn't meet any resistance to the concept. No shock, no amazement, no surprise.
Were they surgeons?
My father is a surgeon. He's dead now. And my grandfather was a family practitioner. I won't say back in the day, but it's one of the things that I speak about in the video. But in those days, offices, you had an office in your home. In Jersey City, New Jersey, not in the rural areas, major city.
Wow.
So it wasn't that it was, in a rural environment. That was the norm at that time. All of the doctors had their offices in their homes. And it wasn't just the psychiatrists, they usually did, but it was family practice guys, everybody did. So my grandfather had an office in the home, and my father did. And then in the later years, they all got offices in office buildings or in complexes someplace else. But as a kid, I used to go downstairs, and there'd be patients. There was a waiting room, and there was, my dad was a doctor, a surgeon. So there were dressings and, medical stuff around. And when I went to my grandfather's house, he had medicine cabinets, and it was clear that there was that part of the house or those areas. So it wasn't alien or strange or unsupportive or anything like that when I had made those decisions.
Well, did your dad talk a lot about surgery? Do you think he inspired you to particularly go into the direction of surgery?
Right. No. No. My parents didn't tell us what to do. I have brothers and sisters. They didn't suggest pathways for careers. They worked really hard and supported us, and we all did what I hope we felt like we wanted to do with our lives. And it was all cool to them. So there's just like nothing that I can think of that was steering a pathway. When I was in high school, I will say that my mother was very concerned. Absolutely, a big thing with her was always that you be able to support yourself, that you don't rely on a man to provide for you. And if you ended up getting married, having children, and that was fine, but that wasn't like the goal. The goal was to have a career, or even not a career, but a means of work, a means to generate, to make your own money. And I was in maybe 7th or 8th grade. And I was in high school, so it couldn't have been that. It was like 9th or 10th grade, whatever. I went to high school in New York City, and my mom was a teacher. I appreciate that Susan's family were educators as well. So, but my mother insisted that I have something that I could do no matter what. And so I learned to become a stenographer. The court reporters, those ladies that sit there with the machine. Yeah, exactly. And so I went to, it was called Stenotype Academy. And after school, I had to go uptown. It was like at 14th or 16th Street, something like that. And I learned to, and Saturday mornings, I had to go after school, like 3 days a week and Saturday mornings. I know, because I had to go into the city on Saturdays so that I could go to learn to become a court reporter. Just in case, all that other stuff didn't work out, here's something that you'll always be able to work. And even now, even though you guys may think that videos and tape recording, digital technology in courts, they still have to have a human stenographer. And so this humans are still in there doing it.
And your mom was right.
You betcha. You betcha.
Okay. All right. Well, switching back over to Dr. DesJardins. And now we're getting you out of high school. Let's talk a little bit about your college career. And, what you've all mentioned so far is the need to specialize and the need to drill deep into one narrow area, because it must be extremely daunting to consider or to pursue or determine that you are going to become a doctor. So I'm really curious as to how you both fared in college. What was the hardest part of what you had to study? What were the challenges to, compete with men? Dr. Gibbs, I would imagine that was a big thing for you as you were coming up to the ranks. But back to Dr. DesJardins. So.
So I guess, I have a little bit of a different view of medicine, actually. I think medicine is a very doable career path for, any bright, interested, and, relatively hardworking person. It's actually, I found it much easier to go through medical school than I would have found it to go to graduate school. My 3 siblings all went to graduate school. And that to me is a much more daunting proposition. You have to come up with something unique and original, and you have to research it. And it's really, really challenging. My brother has a math PhD. How do you come up with new math? Like, that's crazy. Medicine is a very directed course of study. So you tick off all the boxes and you can go there. And so I think it's actually a really doable career path if you're really engaged in it and interested in it. There are a lot of things you have to do, especially these days, if you want to get into medical school. There's a lot of boxes they want you to check. I sat on the board or the admissions board for the local University of Central Florida Medical School for a few years. So it's interesting. I think it's a little different than when I went to school, but the path is laid out for you. And I found that for me to be a very reassuring thing. I knew I ended up studying, I majored in biology, but I studied psychobiology, which is sort of the biology of behavior, which I found really interesting. I did a little bit of research. I almost majored in history, and if I were doing it over again, I would have majored in history because I'm never going to be able to go do that again until I retire. And so I think you can major in anything. You can major in anything and go to medical school. You don't have to be a biology major. You don't have to be a chemistry major. Sometimes they want you to, but there's ways around that, right? So study what you really love. Study what you want to learn about, because college is really about learning how to learn. If you learn how to learn, you can do anything. You can go to any graduate program. You can do anything. You might have to have some more prerequisites, but once you learn how to learn and you learn how to engage and bring things together, bring ideas together, then you can do anything you want. And then it's just a matter of picking the course you want to take. So I found it a relatively straightforward thing. I didn't. It was a transition, I think, more from a life perspective than an academic perspective. I did better. I learned how to study, how to take notes, how to be independent. And those things are what I think college is all about before you get to medical school. And then medical school is about training to be a doctor. You don't need to take anatomy in college. You don't need to take biochemistry in college. You need to learn how to learn, and then you can learn all those things when you get to medical school.
And where did you go to school?
I went to Yale as an undergraduate, and then I went to Washington University in St. Louis for medical school.
Oh, okay.
And actually, I don't know if this is a good place to tell you, but so I think a lot of people are intimidated by cost and things like that. And just one pathway, my pathway, I didn't really want to go more in debt. I actually went into the Air Force. And the Air Force paid my way through medical school. So I came out of medical school with no debt. They actually gave me a living stipend. I had a little bit of debt from college that was easy to pay off. And I had a wonderful experience in the military, which we could talk about, later. But it's just, there are other pathways other than imagining that you have to go $300,000 into debt.
Well, that's very good advice. Dr. Gibbs, what about you? How was college for you?
Yeah, so I will say, I agree with Susan completely. I share her sentiment. I don't know where it's super duper hard and all of that, but I agree with her. So she took the words out of my mouth when she said, you go to college, you don't go to college to go to medical school. And you might think that's why you're going to college, because you need college to get into medical school, but that's not why you should go to college. And I was an anthropology major. Oh. And I purposefully did not major in biology or biochemistry as the drills were doing, because I literally thought, if I'm going to go to medical school, I can do that. I'm going to be doing that all my life. What else am I going to be doing? What else do I want to learn about? And so actually I majored in anthropology. I went to Harvard, And they had a really great anthropology department. It was interesting stuff that was going on at the time. And the other thing about college is you learn how to learn. I think the other piece, again, just embellishing something that Susan said, is that you learn critical thinking, or that's what you should learn. You should learn how to think, how to identify a problem, or how to learn and find the information that you'll need to solve the problem, or even just the joy that you can derive from thinking about a thing. It doesn't have to be a problem that you have to solve, but just thinking about something.
Mhm.
And I think those 4 years, there's a lot of talk about the value of a liberal arts education. I'm not going to go there. Wherever you go to college, you want to make sure it's someplace that you can be comfortable, that you can have the supportive environment, that you can think, that you can learn how to learn or how to develop critical thinking skills. And the other thing about choosing a medical school, my parents wanted me, so I always wanted to go to, I live in California, but I grew up in New Jersey. And I wanted to go to college in California. I actually wanted to go to Stanford. And I had gone to a very progressive high school, and I wanted to go to California. And my mother, I was the first girl, the oldest girl, and my mother said, well, that's really kind of far. And why can't you find some place to go to college that is not west of the Mississippi? So I applied to the East Coast colleges and was accepted at Harvard. It was Radcliffe, actually, but it was still Harvard. And enjoyed the time there. Great, just a fabulous experience, but was really done. I mean, I really had zero, when I say zero desire to go to medical school at Harvard, stay in the Boston area. And I actually, I went to Duke for medical school. And Duke had this very progressive program. They had just started this new medical curriculum. And in normal medical school, you have to spend 2 years doing basic sciences, and then your last 2 years, you do clinical sciences. And Duke decided that that was restrictive. And so they started a program where you only spent 1 year doing basic sciences. Then you did 1 year of clinical sciences, like clinical rotations, and then your last 2 years were totally elective. And you could choose whatever courses, whatever clinical basic requirements that you needed to finish. And that just had my name written all over it. And I actually applied to Duke in something like October of my senior year in college. And I was accepted in medical school by Halloween. And I never applied anywhere else. So I was overjoyed. This isn't a brag. This isn't a brag. It's not of my brilliance. It was just this idea that I kind of knew, and I found something that was really interesting to me. And Duke had come and they had recruited on campus, and that's me. Let me apply. When I went home to Jersey in November, like, I'm ecstatic. I'm already in medical school, and all of my friends are still finishing their applications. And my mother used to stand at the kitchen counter, and we used to sit across from her, and that was kind of like means of communication. And I'm sure, I hope that many of you who might be listening have ways in which you always kind of capture that moment where you're trying to make the point. Some people, they get the kids in the car driving to school, the kids can't run away, or maybe it's horseback riding or doing a favorite sport with a parent. But my mom's thing was, she would stand at the kitchen counter and she would be on one side and we would kind of sit and we'd be eating, or that was her moment. And I was really ecstatic. I was so happy I had gotten into medical school. And I went, Mom, I'm going to Duke, and it's this great school and have this great program. Now, I'm sure that you can look at me, and I hope that you see that I'm an African-American woman. my mother is an African-American woman, and my mother looked at me across the kitchen counter, and she looked at me and she said, you know, I really don't know what's wrong with you. I don't know what's wrong with Harvard University. Your father and I have spent our lives getting out of the South, and you want to run back there. So I was like, whoops, but like, I want to go. I want to still go. And I had, you know, I had a little Volvo car my senior year by the time I graduated, and I drove down to Durham, North Carolina, never having been in the South. I didn't even think of it. It just hadn't crossed my mind. And I will tell you that it was the most interesting and life-changing, important, not life-changing, but really an important, I'm so glad I went to Duke. I'm so glad I went to the South. I'm so glad that I had that experience. And then when I finished medical school at Duke, I then said, okay, I'm done. I want to go to California. And I only applied to California residency programs. So I applied to UCSF and UCLA, and I put some Seattle, Washington, and Portland in there, but I'm done. I'm done with East Coast. I've had my Northeast experience. I've had the Southeastern experience, really rewarding. I'm done. And I've never wanted ever to go back to the East Coast.
Well, what was it about the South that so informed you or changed you or struck you?
Yeah, so the South, as Susan lives in Florida, is a very different world in my mind to me. And I have my mother's family is from Virginia. And that was the premier state of enslavement of Black Africans who were brought here to this country against their will. And a lot, as I'm sure many of you know, of our American history begins in the state of Virginia. And my mother was from Virginia. And I was in Durham, and my mom, her town, the town that her family was from, was Blackstone, Virginia. And you don't know where that is, that's not important, but Blackstone, Virginia is about 2.5 hours from Durham, North Carolina, and you have to drive 85. And so when I was in medical school, if there was a weekend or there was some time that I was away or had time off, or I just wanted to get out of Durham, I used to drive to Blackstone. And I had relatives there, and they were on the farm that had been part of an original land grant that my ancestors had purchased when they were emancipated. And my great uncle, he was my grand uncle. He was my grandfather's brother, so he's my grand uncle. They had a farm, and when I would go there, he had cows, and he had pigs and chickens, and I'm from Jersey City, New Jersey, and I used to go down and visit with them, spend time, and walk the land, smell the smells. So it was a very, very important 4 years, and I relished the time there to learn a lot about my ancestry, a lot about the South, and learn medicine and take care of a wide variety of people in Durham, North Carolina.
Wow. Did you encounter a lot of racism in the South while you were there?
I think that's like how can you not encounter racism? And the South is, that's part of the modus operandi of surviving. And I can't speak to all places in the South. I only know North Carolina. I know Virginia. I've never been to Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, if you will, the deep South. And I'm not saying that I have any knowledge, deep experiential knowledge about it, but it influenced my life and very valuable. I mean, how can you be a doctor if you don't learn and have exposure to lots of different types of people that we'll meet?
Yeah, no, that's fascinating to me. I lived in Alabama for 6 years when I was married. So I moved there from New York. So it was just extreme culture shock.
And you're in Kentucky now, right?
Yes, my family's all from Kentucky, but I never lived here. I was already in college when they moved here. So, but I want to get back to Dr. DesJardins and ask you about the military, because it sounds like you had a pretty fascinating time there.
Yeah. It was a really great experience. I took the scholarship because really because it was free medical school. I'm probably the last person that anybody I knew in high school would have predicted would be in the military. So I come from a very liberal family, and nobody I've ever known was in the military. But it was a good way to go to medical school. So I actually ended up in the Air Force. Interesting story, because I called the Navy to ask about their scholarship, and I was told that they would be taking 0 or 1 females into their program, was what they told me. And I'm like, well, then I don't want to work for you. So I took the Air Force scholarship, which turned out very well for me. It wasn't what I expected. I really enjoyed working in the military. I loved being a doctor in the military. Everybody has insurance. Everybody shows up to their appointments. If they don't, you call the commanding officer and tell them that their kid didn't show up to their appointment and they needed to come in, and that was the last time they missed their appointment. The people I worked with were all fantastic physicians. They were all caring. Not many of them were in my political party, but we really had a great collegial environment where we would talk. I was out in Hawaii, living in Hawaii, which is not a bad gig either.
That's where you were stationed?
I was stationed in DC for 3 years and then in Hawaii for 3 years. So that's not a bad gig. But we were there when there was issues with the Supreme Court and the election with Gore, and we had different approaches, but it was a great time to watch that sort of constitutional event occur. And it was interesting to watch it with people who didn't agree with me politically, but agreed with me about the things that really mattered, which is, loving the country, loving your fellow people, caring about what other people think, respecting opinions. So that was really great. I was able to care for dependents. I was fortunate. I was able to go and do exactly what I wanted to do. I got to take the exact track I wanted to. I did pediatrics in the military, the residency, and then I was able to go do a civilian pediatric cardiology fellowship right after residency. I didn't have to go do general pediatrics, which would have been fine. I think I would have enjoyed it, but I was anxious to get on with what I wanted to do. So it turned out to be a really great experience for me. I almost stayed in the military until this particular job came up. That was about almost 20 years ago. So I've been here in the same job for about 20 years.
So you would have.
I value my time there, and it was great.
So if you were in the military, you would have had to go to a place of war if necessary, right?
True. Now I got a little lucky, although I think even in retrospect, I never was deployed. I almost wish that I had had that experience. I mean, there are things about it that I'm sure I would have not liked, but having watched all my friends be deployed and the things that they got out of it, they really grew and learned a lot about themselves and about people. And I think they really appreciated, even if it was difficult, the experience. The time that I was in the military, I wasn't married, I didn't have kids. So it was not an issue with having to leave my kids. So that I think would have taken it to a different level for me. And I know that people who did leave their kids, and I think I can't imagine how hard that would be. But I didn't get married until after I got out of the military. My particular position was I was actually working at an Army hospital, but I was in the Air Force. So the Army couldn't deploy me because I was Air Force, and the Air Force couldn't deploy me because I was in an Army billet. So I was sort of in a protected environment. So that was, I think, fortunate from my perspective. On the other hand, there were some other things that didn't turn out so well. I ended up being the lone cardiologist for all of Hawaii and all of the Pacific Rim for about 15 months. So I was on call every day for 15 months if I was on the island. So that was
Is that the lone pediatric cardiologist or the lone cardiologist?
lone pediatric cardiologist.
Okay.
But so any baby anywhere in Korea or Japan or in Hawaii who was suspected to have a pediatric heart problem, I took care of them all. And I also had to run their ICU because they lost their intensivist. So I was trying to keep kids alive who had problems that I had not studied since, residency. So I think I did my share.
She went to war. She was at war. She was there.
What's that?
I said that's like being at war.
It was a little bit like being at war. I worked a lot, and I did not see as much of the islands as I would have liked, but still it was getting to live and work in paradise. So it was
we've got a lot of questions coming in, and one is actually related to your military service. It's does one apply to the armed forces expressing an interest in medicine, or do they assign you once you're in?
So that's a very interesting question. It depends on how you're approaching it. So there's a lot of different pathways to both medicine and the military. So you can go into the military right out of high school, and you can go into a billet wanting to study to be a medic, for instance, which is, before college. You can go into college and you can be in ROTC, which is a Reserve Officer Training Corps. Sometimes with a scholarship, sometimes not with a scholarship, but you basically commit to working in the military for a number of years based on your scholarship after you get out of college. In that situation, you have no guarantee that you're going to necessarily get to go into medicine as part of your military experience. So you're rolling the dice a little bit that both you'll get into medical school and that the Army or Air Force or whatever service you're in will let you go to medical school. So, they do take a certain number of ROTC candidates and allow them to go to medical school. So that's certainly a possibility, but it's not guaranteed when you accept the scholarship. And if they say, no, you can't go to medical school, we need you to go and be, a field officer, then you don't really have much choice. Wow. That's something that you would want to definitely talk to your recruiter about. The other pathway is to go to be in college on your own and then applying to medical school and applying for a medical scholarship. So that is a scholarship to go to medical school. You become an officer when you accept the scholarship. So you're automatically an officer. You don't have to do the ROTC part, but you can either go to a civilian medical school, which is called an HPSP scholarship, Health Professions Services Program, something like that. And that lets you go to medical school as a civilian. You do stints on active duty during medical school and certain training. And then after medical school, you owe 1 year per year of training. So I owed 4 years after I finished medical school. Training within the military, like a residency training, doesn't count for that. So I did my residency in the military, and then I owed 4 years after that, which ended up being 6, so I could go to Hawaii. The other option out of college is to go directly to what's called the USUS, Uniformed Health Services University, something like that. And that is an actual medical school that's run by the military. It's a government medical school. It's run by the military. You're in one of you could be Army, Navy, or Air Force and be at USUS. And then from there, and you're on active duty that whole time. So you get paid significantly more than if you're just in an HPSP scholarship, but you also owe more time as a response to that. And that's the only medical school that has that. So if you want to go to Harvard, then, you would want an HPSP scholarship. If you wanted, if you have a family, let's say, and you want a way to go to medical school where you're still going to have an income, then USUS is a great choice. So there's a lot of different pathways. And again, a recruiter can talk to you about all of those things. Just make sure you really understand and clarify exactly what they mean.
Well, one of our guests is commenting that it's so wonderful to hear of your military medical experiences, so valuable to learn of how the military paid your medical ed. For pre-med students, particularly women and other underrepresented populations, need to hear your story. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I wouldn't have thought that I would do it beforehand, like going into the military. I think the military benefited. I benefited from the military, and I think the military benefits from having people who would not otherwise normally be the ones who are in the military. You end up, having people that are not in the echo chamber of everybody agreeing with a certain politic or a certain belief structure. So I think everybody wins.
Well, and Dr. Gibb, we had another comment here from one of our Latina guests. In reality, as a Latina with Ivy credentials, I continue to experience racism to this day here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Thank you for your feedback, Dr. Gibbs. So, and then we've got another question coming up. I'm going to put this to, oh, wait a minute, hang on. Hold on. Okay, so our friend Ellen Schaefer asked, would people who trained as doctors 50 years ago recognize themselves in your lives and experiences? Dr. DesJardins, I'll ask you that first.
I think anybody who's been through medical school recognizes some components of themselves. I think medicine 50 years ago was very different in some ways, but ultimately it's, the relationships you have with your patients and with families and with the disease processes. I think that resonates with anybody who's been in medicine and who's treated patients. I think we all look at like the residents these days and we're like, oh, when I was a resident, right? Oh, I took all my patients home with me and walked back again. And kids these days, they don't have the same devotion to their patients. And none of that's true, right? Like we all like to complain about, how hard we worked and how overworked we were and how can they possibly learn? But the reality is that, the world, society changes, everything morphs into something slightly different and usually slightly better over time. And some people will recognize that it's better, and some people will recognize, will think, well, it should only be the way it was in my day because they're crotchety. So I think most rational people would have a pretty, I think they would value, hopefully, the changes that have been good, having more women, having more minorities, having more people that can champion different causes out there, and not just having it be like when I was 3 and it was only, boys doctors, and really male white doctors was the only thing we ever saw. And now there's just a much broader spectrum, and I think that's good for everybody.
And Dr. Gibbs, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I mean, I didn't really get the meaning of the question about, would you recognize yourself 50 years ago?
Would people who trained 50 years ago recognize our experiences now?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Can't answer that one.
Okay.
I would say that there's a lot of technology, right? And there's electronic medical records. I like that there's standardization. I like that there's clinical practice guidelines. I don't like Dr. Google. So when a patient will come in and have like already diagnosed themselves with something, and actually Dr. Google isn't bad most of the time, but sometimes it's just not what they have and it's totally off base. And I also am, the anti-vaccination people, always as a pediatrician, it hurts me. Like if I thought this vaccine gave your child autism, I would not do that. I do no harm is an oath that all of us believe in, and we're not. Why would I give you something to give your child autism? I'm here to prevent measles, mumps, rubella, and sterilization, and orchitis is the big thing with mumps, where you go sterile if you get that. So I would say the frustrations of the technology is people coming in and not necessarily mansplaining, but doctor-splaining. And it's like, did you go to medical school? Have you been doing medicine for 20 years? Have you read the latest research? Because I have, So that is a difference. I think there's
something, the other side to that, Sophia, is the idea, however, that we do like patients to take some responsibility for their own care. And more than just the rampant paternalism that just tell me what to do, doc. You want them to own a lot about their, not only the things that you tell them, take this medicine, but also to actively work in their lives to not develop high blood pressure, or not to do some of the things that cause a lot of adult morbidity, be that as it may. So it's not one or the other. Certainly the insurance companies are very big on pushing for the person to assume greater responsibility for their own health care management. And I agree with you completely about the Dr. Googles and, people coming in and telling you what they have, and you're going, there's no way you have that. So it goes both ways. I don't have the answer. It's a work in progress for sure.
Lori, I'm not sure how much time we have. I wondered whether you were going to discuss sort of family, like having families. I think for a lot of girls, they wonder about having families and some of the questions with flexibility, things like that. And I think there's, I don't know how much time we have left. So I just wanted to make sure that we touched on that.
No, we still do have time. We are winding down. I have about 3 more questions to go, but why don't you talk about a little bit about that? Because it is always a challenge for every woman.
Yeah, so I think, and I was, when Dr. Gibbs was talking earlier, this struck me that she's winding down, right? Because I'm actually doing a little bit of the same, but I came to my family very late. So I was 38 when I had my oldest child. So 42 when I had my youngest, 39 and 42. So I just think that there's so many different pathways in medicine. And I think that that's something that people should understand, that there are really a lot of different ways that you can be a successful physician. And it's not always about working the 60-hour work weeks that it used to be. Even when I started out, nobody worked part-time, or very few people worked part-time. Everybody had a job where you're working 60, 70 hours. Residency was, nobody had babies in residency, nobody. I remember when I was a 3rd-year resident, one of the women in my residency year got pregnant. She didn't even have a baby during residency, but she was pregnant during residency. And it was like this, her telling the chief was like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared to tell the chief. And now I will tell you, I don't, a majority of our pediatric residents, it seems like, are out with babies. My niece is an MD PhD student who's just getting back to clinical work and is out having a baby. And there's just so much more flexibility, I think. And I'm not sure about the surgical world, because pediatrics is a very family and people friendly area in general. And I have found my career to be extraordinarily flexible after I got in the military, especially. I've found a lot of support with my colleagues. I went down, I have 3 kids. They're within 4 years of each other. So they're all kind of the same age. And after about 8 or 9 years, I was like, this is just so much to try to deal with school and home and my husband working and me working and call. And I actually went down to 90% time, which sounds like not that big a deal. And it wasn't that big a deal exactly, except that all that time was extra vacation days. So I was able to take off all the vacation time that my kids have and still have some time to myself. And now I'm just going down to 60% time and have even more flexibility. And there are ways to do all of that. And there's ways to be successful and happy and have a full committed family life. I know lots of people who work half time, or people who take some time off and then go back. And there's just a lot of different ways to do that. And I hope that nobody feels dissuaded from going into medicine just because they know that they want to have a family, because there's a lot of ways to be a successful physician.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And I was going to ask about the work-life balance. How do doctors, some of the busiest, most stressed out people on the planet, how do you balance that? Dr. Gibbs, what's been your experience in this?
So I would just echo both of what Susan and something Sophia said at the beginning. And since I see we're at the top of the hour, So the thing that's really great about medicine, and I sell this to anybody that ever asks me if they want to be a doctor, I don't want to make it like my party line, but it's just so important. Medicine has something for everybody. It's applied science, if you will. And you can find joy and happiness and a great life and be able to feed your family in it's got so, if you love physics, so become a radiologist. If you love blood, okay, become a surgeon. If you want to deal with families, or you like people, or you just want to sit and think, you become a psychiatrist. I mean, there's just, and now there's just even greater gradations along the line. So whatever you think you thought, everybody on this call who's got a kid, who's maybe thinking of going into medicine, everything you think you thought you knew, you don't know. And whatever you evolve or in your journey, going to college, or you think you still want to go into medicine, you will be able to find something in that giant domain of applied science that will be very fulfilling. And if you want to have a big family, maybe surgery is not the thing for you as a woman.
Maybe not.
But pediatrics sounds to me like it's very supportive, or psychiatry or radiology. I mean, that's not the reason that you can't see yourself as, quote, a doctor, a medical doctor versus a PhD doctor. So,
okay. Well, all of this has just been fascinating. So my final question to you both, and I'll start with you, Dr. Gibbs. What is your advice to young people that are considering a career in medicine? What is the best advice you can give them?
I just gave it. I mean, the best advice is to definitely pursue your dream, not your dream, that sounds so corny, but if you think in any way that you're interested, if you like science, it does have a foundation in science versus history or anthropology. It's relevant, but it's foundationally is science-based. And you should do it. You should certainly pursue it, not be afraid of anything that you've heard or you think just jump in, and you can find something in that huge, it's vast, it's just really vast, and try it out.
That's great advice. Dr. DesJardins, what about you?
I'm actually going to go back to something that Dr. Gibbs said about college, which is, so for most of you young people who are really high school, maybe in college, go to college to go to college. Like, maybe you're going to want to go to medicine, maybe you're not. Don't go into medicine because your mom or dad wants you to, or because it's a profession that you think sounds good, or you think you're going to make a lot of money, because you won't make as much money as you would doing something else for the most part. Do it because it's actually the thing you want to do. And in order to find that out, you're going to have to spend some time with doctors in the hospital and really figure out if it's really what you want to do, because it's a big time investment. I think you can do it. I'm sure you can do it, but you want to be sure that you actually do want to do it. It's not that you can't drop out, but you don't want to waste your time either. And study the thing that you think you would want to do if you didn't end up going to medicine, right? So if you love history, or you love anthropology, or you love linguistics, or you love music, study that, because that might be what you actually want to do. Maybe you don't want to go to medicine. Maybe all these people telling you that medicine is a great job and you should do it is why you think you want to do it now. Be sure that that's really what you want to do, and do the thing that you love. Don't do the thing that somebody else thinks you should do.
This has just been the most fantastic thing. I want to give you another comment that just arrived. I think you are all groundbreakers in many ways. I think it feels normal to you because you did it. You've lived through and created a boatload of change, seems to me. I think that's a great note to end this on. It's just been absolutely fascinating. Before we wrap things up, though, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Krause. She usually has our final words.
Well, I want to thank you all. Susan, Verna, Sophia, you are trailblazers, and everybody needs a hero in their life, whoever it is. If it's a male, it's a female, whoever However, and you have shown us different pathways to get there. I get the wonderful opportunity of telling you how we move forward. And we're hoping there will be a generosity of spirit coming out of this symposium. Give with your heart, give with your soul, give with your head. But please help us keep going on and having role models, because I, like many of these women, my father told me I could do anything. And my mother told him to tell me that again and again. And I was lucky, but not everybody in school agreed with that. I had a guidance counselor that wanted me to go to a commuter school. I have a PhD from Carnegie Mellon. I ran straight uphill because that's the only way I know to be. So everyone here, please reach for the stars.
All right. Thank you so much, Michelle. This has just been an absolutely great panel. There's so much useful and valuable information, and so much personal experience just really kind of connects us to exactly what it would be like to pursue a career in this. So I want to thank you, Dr. DesJardins and Dr. Gibbs, for joining with us today. I think that this will live on our website for a long time to come, and it will be very, very helpful for so many young girls. I think you've just inspired all of us, and you are about to inspire even more. So thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm going to sign off now, and we will see you next time. Thanks.
Bye.
Peace.
Thanks everybody for coming. So cool to see mini Verna.
Yeah.
Amazing.
The
Thank
fourth.
you.